BPMS. Okay, so in order to understand what BPMS is, we're going to learn a little bit about its history. Okay, so how did BPMS appear? First of all, we have to understand that most companies had a traditional management or a traditional approach towards their different improvements that they had in their company. And usually in this traditional management, what companies used to do, they would try to look for the best team, they tried to look for the best resources, maybe the best technologies in order to have better results. Okay? So let's imagine I have a company and I'm trying to get better results. Well, I'll invest in a better computer. I'll try to hire a very good sales team. So by doing all these different investments, traditionally, some companies thought, or most companies actually thought, that they would be performing much better, they would have better results, and so on. But obviously, this wasn't enough. Regardless whether you have the best employees, or you have the best technologies, or you have the best computer, it doesn't really matter. If you don't have a good set of coordinated activities, if you're not actually evaluating what's happening with all those activities, if they're actually being performed correctly, if they're being performed on time, if everyone's doing exactly what they need to do, those companies, they're not really going to be uh, working properly. So this new methodology appeared called BPM. Okay, it's a it's a methodology that companies follow in order to improve the way in which all the activities in their company are performed. And this methodology is perfect. Okay, all you have to do is maybe write down some instructions for your employees, indicate how they're supposed to work, maybe create different images, audios, help so they can know how they're supposed to perform in any kind of situation. Okay, and once you build this methodology of how your business is supposed to work, then employees are supposed to follow this methodology. But this is still not enough. Why? Because most companies have a very difficult time having all of their employees, especially when they're larger companies, follow these methodologies, these documents. It's very good to have a document there placed on a shelf so anyone can read it whenever they need to do so, but it might not be enough. Maybe someone forgets, maybe someone skipped something in the document and they just don't know how to do it anymore. So it's not a very accurate way or a very good way of having your employees work. Obviously, the time invested in the learning journey while they're trying to uh, learn how to perform their activities is always going to be much longer if they're having to look for the information in documentation than if they have a system that's able to coordinate all their activities, that's able to ensure that whatever they're doing is being done properly. Okay, so what are we going to do? What are we going to do with the BPMS tool? Basically, what we're going to do is introduce all the theoretical approaches of BPM into this BPMN system. Okay, and now the system is going to be in charge of optimizing, automating, ensuring compliance, and providing all the necessary analysis for the continuous improvement of the processes. So the companies that implement BPMN, they improve the whole entity and they highlight weak points and they enhance the most important activities. As a result, they're able to be more flexible, more competitive, and more efficient. Okay, so here we've seen the difference in these three different approaches. Okay, so then the first approach would be a company, for example, let's imagine a football team. They decide, okay, in order to perform at our best, we're going to hire the best football players. Okay, that would be the first approach. But then the company realizes this is not enough. There needs to be coordination. Maybe there has to be someone who tells each one of these players where they're supposed to be playing, at what part of the field, when they're supposed to be resting, when they're supposed to be playing. Maybe there has to be someone coordinating maybe the payments of the players and so on. And then obviously for lots of these companies, it's not enough with just having a methodology or written written books or written instructions somewhere in the company. So it's much better to go a step further and ensure that everything is being performed as it should, thanks to one of these tools, thanks to BPMS tool. One of the main reasons to implement a BPMS is to collect data through the processes. This way we can analyze everything that's happening within our company and in real time. So something we know for sure nowadays is that each time we trigger a process or we launch a process or each time a process takes place within our company, data is going to be generated. If we have data, obviously we can analyze this data. Now, here we have an example. It's our previous example where we have a truck. It's coming into the warehouse every day. It's leaving all this material that has to be classified. And each one of these processes is going to be generating data. So Autoportal is going to be used to manage all these processes. And all the information is going to be stored in its databases. Okay, so all the information is going to be structured, it's going to be stored, and we can analyze it whenever we want. How are we going to do this? We're going to use the tools that Autoportal offers us in order to create these reports, in order to monitor these processes and know what's happening with them, if we're supposed to improve them, if we can be working in a better way. Okay, so the data of the company must be stored somewhere. This is something that all companies do. They all have data and they all store their data. Some of them store it in Excel sheets, in libraries, in databases, in different applications, and so on. But obviously, this can lead to a series of problems. What happens when hundreds of people have to work with the same data? Who makes sure that each one of these people that's involved in these processes is actually inputting the data with the correct structure, with the correct format? Is it easy for them to input this data? Okay, this is another question we have to make ourselves because obviously all the companies want to have data, they want to be able to analyze it, but sometimes the data isn't structured, you can't access it in one unique place. It's very difficult to make decisions based on the data because it's scattered everywhere. Okay, so what Autoportal is going to ensure is that the data is correctly structured. It's also going to ensure that any data that we're using in external applications is also correctly managed, correctly structured, and correctly updated. And obviously, it's going to allow a very user-friendly interface to allow anyone who has to input this data to do it correctly and to do it easily. Okay, so obviously it's not the same to input data into an Excel sheet or to input data directly into a data table than to enter a form. Maybe you have to do a request for material and you input a few very simple fields, and once you populate those fields, all the data is immediately structured correctly in the database of the application. So we can start monitoring it. We can see how many orders have been done of that type. We can see who did the order, uh, how long it took for the order to be delivered, and so on. Any activity that is being performed in that process is going to be correctly structuring the data in the database that can be very easily analyzed later on. So what's the difference between any BPMS and Autoportal? This one is a bit tricky because obviously any BPMS must have these four functionalities in order to be considered a BPMS. Okay, so any BPMS in the market is going to be able to create processes. Any of them is going to have a form designer. They all have connectors in order, or let's say they all have possibilities to connect to other applications, and they all have to have monitoring tools so you can know what's happening with the processes. Obviously, if it could be a system that allows us to create processes by coding them. Okay, so we might have to code absolutely everything. Obviously, in order to design a process and have it up and running, it's going to take us probably weeks or months or even years because it's not easy to code a process. Some of these BPMS systems are low code applications, so maybe you just have to code 80% of the process. The rest, maybe can be configured with parameters. Then in our case, for example, in Autoportal, we have a platform that it's actually a no code application. You don't need absolutely any code in order to design a process. This means that it's going to be much quicker to implement. When you want to implement a process, it's going to take what it would take you maybe a year in implementation with a coding or with a low code application. In Autoportal, it's going to take you probably weeks or even days. Then the form designers, obviously there's all kinds of form designers out there in the market. These form designers can be less or more powerful. They might allow you, for example, in Autoportal, they allow you to create comment logs. They allow you to create all kinds of different types of fields. For example, you cannot only manage data like text, numbers, and things like that, or selection fields, but you can also manage multimedia images, you can manage audio, you can manage any type of file, documents. There's a complete document management system within the application. There's You can manage practically any type of multimedia feature you can imagine within the form designer. And there's all kinds of different features within the form designer that allow you to work very easily. For example, conditional logic. There's all kinds of design features. You have CSS features that allow you to um, implement these forms much quicker. There's also all kinds of connectors with other applications. For example, some systems out there might offer you a couple options in order to connect with external applications. But once we learn how to use the connectors in Autoportal, we're going to see there's all kinds of different ways of connecting with external applications. REST web services, swap web services, API connectors, there's ODBC connectors, there's specific connectors for different applications, for example, like a CRM, an ERP, such as SAP or a data dynamics connector and so on. Okay, so this is something we'll see later on. And when it comes to monitoring, obviously we can have very simple monitoring tools that allow us to see maybe how the flow is going from point A to point B and so on, from activity A to activity B and from activity B to activity C and so on, and how the data is being generated in each one of these activities. But in Autoportal, you have all kinds of different monitoring tools. You have, for example, chronometry tools that allow you to know if people are actually performing their tasks on time. There's all kinds of customizable dashboards and graphics that you can create, like a pie chart, a bar chart, and any other type of chart. Okay, and besides, it's got all kinds of additional features that are not included in most BPMS. So what we think here at Autoportal is that the future of programming is to not actually need to program. So in order to get all your processes up and running, you're not going to have to input a single line of code. The tool is full of features in order for you to create all kinds of triggers, actions, activities automatically without having to program anything just by setting up parameters. This is something you guys are actually going to see at the end of this course. You're going to see a demonstration, and throughout the courses you're going to learn how to build any type of application without the use of any code. It is true that Autoportal does have the door open just in case someone wants to input some additional code. So it's not, let's say it's not shut down to coding within the application, but it's going to be something additional that someone can use if they actually need it. But most of the time, businesses don't need this. Another very interesting feature that the system has all over the place is that you're going to be able to reuse everything. Okay, so let's say you're starting with your first project. Usually the first project is going to take us some time because we have to start from scratch. We have to design everything from scratch, and this is a bit more time consuming. So let's say our first project has 5 diagrams, 5 processes, 64 forms, 120 different types of contents, 540 different types of data fields, different data repositories, CSS designs, emails, websites, portals, and so on. Okay, so let's say it took us a month to cover our first project. Okay. After that, we have a second project. Maybe we want to design new processes. We want to design new dashboards. We want to design a different uh, experience for certain activities that are performed in the company. Perfect. Well, the next time we want to configure everything, we can reuse most of what we have previously created. Okay, so this is something very interesting because the first project might take a little bit more of investment, a little bit more of time, but the more processes we create, the more dashboards we create, the more activities we can perform within the system, the better return on investment we're going to get with this tool. Okay, so obviously there is some companies who might be uh, automating 3, 10, 12 different processes because maybe this is the core value in their company and what they uh, really need to automate. But obviously they could be automating much more. Maybe they could be automating processes that they haven't even really analyzed or imagined that they could automate. And the more they automate, the better return on investment that they're going to get with this tool. Because each process or each implementation is going to be quicker and quicker and quicker, and you're going to have to invest less time to achieve much better results. So as it says here, there's many applications that have defined processes. So we can purchase any kind of application in order to manage a certain process. For example, maybe we're in a pharmaceutical company and we want to manage a process in order to notify our customers of the amount or the doses they have to intake during every week. Doses of medicine, for example. Uh, and we might purchase a program in order to do this. And this program has its features. Okay, obviously these features usually they're not flexible. So lots of the times they don't really meet the company's needs. Maybe the company needs changes or they need new processes to be performed or new activities to be executed within the system. And sometimes, well, this can be done by maybe developing an extension for this software or developing new features in the software. Obviously, this is very costly and time consuming. And sometimes it's not even possible because the software provider doesn't give us this possibility. So there's lots of companies who need a system that's totally flexible, that can perfectly orchestrate any type of activities, not only their processes that they're performing within their BPMS application, but also any kind of process that is being performed outside of the BPMS tool. For example, let's say we have a process in Autoportal that is able to manage maybe a new sales of a product, maybe a vehicle. Okay, so each time we sell a vehicle, we need to update all the information in a CRM. Okay, so maybe the sales team can use this tool and they can see the information perfectly updated. After that, maybe we have to input the data in SharePoint. So there's certain documentations related to that vehicle that we have to store in a certain library. After that, we have to check related emails to that sales process, and maybe we have to compile all the email data in an Excel, okay, and store it somewhere. Afterwards, we have to create a register in the ERP with all the information of the new vehicle that's been sold. And finally, maybe we have to publish on Facebook, maybe a gratitude to the customer saying thank you for working with us, such and such. Okay. So we're not only coordinating or orchestrating the activities within the process, but we're also updating and managing all kinds of other tools. So with Autoportal, the user is actually going to be the developer and they can create unlimited processes. All the necessary components are going to be in the application as standard. And then there's some optional models for specific functions that are also available. These are additional because maybe some companies or most companies don't need them. For example, maybe there's an additional model called multi-language that allows you to design processes that can be used in different languages. So these are additional models, but practically everything is available in the core product. Okay, so now what we're going to see is the different layers that we're going to interact with. During this course, we're going to learn how to interact with the user layer. We're going to learn how to interact with the design layer. And later on in the next courses, we're also going to learn how to access the data layer. We're going to learn how to access the integration layer. And there's a more technical course that's going to allow us to learn how to uh, access the external data layer. Okay, so here in this example, we can see through the user layer, any user with permissions is going to be able to access with their user and password. And they're going to be accessing the design layer. In the design layer, if you're any user, any type of user without any special administrator credentials, you're going to be able to uh, interact with the product with any feature they build for you. For example, what type of features is the CEO of the company going to be able to uh, display on his screen once he accesses the application? Well, it depends of all the applications that have been developed for him in the design layer. So let's say I'm an administrator and I access the design layer. And from here, I start creating, I develop processes, I develop the diagrams, I create dashboards, reports, and all kinds of different features. And I publish all these features for the CEO of the company. Okay. So all of this is not going to require absolutely any code. This is something we're going to learn throughout these courses. Another thing we're going to learn is how to interact with these tools. For example, how to input data in SharePoint, how to input data in SQL, in file systems, in different libraries, how to store data in different data repositories that we're going to learn how to create. We're also going to learn how to use different connectors, such as web services, data importers, and all kinds of other connectors. We're also going to see how to use how to use scripts within the application, but this is something we're not going to enter in detail. This is one of the most advanced courses, just if someone wants to add additional scripts to a certain process or to a certain feature within the application. And then obviously we're also going to see how to interact with Internet of Things, external applications, external databases. In order to do this down here, we are going to need some we are going to need to have some technical skills. Okay, so in order to build all kinds of applications, we're not going to need anything. But when it comes to working with external databases, with external applications, we are going to have to understand how a database works, how a web service works, and so on. Okay, some of these can be easily taught to anyone without technical skills, but for others, it is interesting to be able to have a bit more of a technical profile. But this is just one of the last courses where you learn how to integrate with external databases and external software.